everyone, my name is Catherine Sofel. I am a registered dietitian and I also hold a master's degree in nutrition as well. And today I'm going to be going over special nutrient needs of older adults, specifically going over vitamins and minerals. So this is going to be important for individuals who are caring for those who are in long-term care facilities or acute living facilities to have an idea of what nutrients are important and signs and symptoms to look out for if deficiencies do occur. So today's objectives are going to review older adults specifically, and then we're going to go over the factors that affect the nutritional status of older adults, and then get into some of the specific vitamins and minerals, such as vitamin B12, calcium, vitamin D, zinc, and lastly vitamin C. So these don't cover all of the nutrients, but these are going to be the top 5 vitamins or minerals that are commonly seen in older adults. So what are older adults? What are the classifications? So we have older adults that are classified from a young age. So that's going to be anywhere between the ages of 65 to 74 years old. And then we have old, which is going to be classified as 75 to 84 years old. And then we have the oldest group of older adults, and that's going to be anywhere or any age from 85 years and older. So older adults, especially the oldest adults, so those who are 85 years and older, are at an increased risk for poor nutritional status, unintentional weight loss, and malnutrition. And this is the result of several factors such as physiological changes associated with aging, social and economic statuses, and then environmental factors as well. So aging is associated with an increased risk of low vitamin consumption in general. And in the U.S. specifically, as we age, intake of vitamin consumption or of overall calories substantially decreases by age. So normally we see about a 1,000 to 1,200 calorie difference in those who are of a younger age population in men. So we see a reduction of about 1,000 calories in older populations in men. And then women, we see a decrease of about 600 to 800 calories in women. And these are all by age 70. So around age 70, we see this massive decrease in overall calorie intake, which is going to increase the risk of decreased vitamin and mineral consumption if the overall calorie intake is going to be reduced. So looking at nutrient intake, a reduction in daily calories is going to equal a decline in nutrients such as vitamins and minerals, which is why we see an increased risk of vitamin or mineral deficiencies in older adults. And lower food intake among the elderly has been associated with several nutrient deficiencies such as calcium, iron, zinc, B vitamins, and vitamin E. And about 50% of older adults have vitamin and mineral intake less than the daily recommended intake values. And about 10 to 30% of older adults have subnormal levels of vitamin and minerals. So this is where we start to see these deficiencies come in, about 10 to 30% of the population. So vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. So we have vitamin B12, calcium, and vitamin D. And all 3 of these nutrients are less effectively absorbed in those who are 70 years or older compared to the younger age. So the absorption process starts in the mouth and it goes through and takes place in the stomach, the small intestine, and the large intestine. As naturally as we age, some of these absorption processes are not as effective as we start to age. And then with vitamin A, we see that absorption may be increased. So now we're going to get into the first nutrient, vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 is a water-soluble vitamin, meaning that if we consume excess amounts of it, it is excreted through urine. So it is considered an essential nutrient acquired through the diet, and it's this is a pretty common deficiency that we see. So some foods that are rich in vitamin B12 are going to be fish, shellfish such as crab, cheese, chicken, eggs, red meat, milk, and almonds. And vitamin B12 is involved in several cellular processes, and the deficiency has the greatest impact on the generation of new blood cells and neurological function of the brain. So B12 prevents homocysteine, which is a compound, from accumulating in the tissues in the blood. And in individuals who have a B12 deficiency may have higher levels of homocysteine, and this low levels of B12 and high levels of homocysteine is associated with an increased risk of vascular disease, stroke, and certain cancers. So having a B12 deficiency can have a plethora of risk factors for chronic diseases. And high levels of homocysteine is also associated with impaired cellular methylation, which indirectly inhibits DNA synthesis by basically trapping folate and resulting in hematological abnormalities. So vitamin B12 deficiency occurs in about 5 to 20% of older adults, which is a pretty large number. And 60% of these deficiencies are due to malabsorption. So vitamin B12 specifically is absorbed in the stomach, and so any abnormalities in the stomach are going to impair the absorption of this mineral. And as I mentioned earlier, as we age, the function of the stomach absorption process is significantly reduced. So the absorption involves the stomach, pancreas, and small intestine. And in healthy adults, about half of the ingested B12 present in the food is absorbed into the body. So in an unhealthy individual, young individual, let's say that we consume a food that has 20 milligrams of B12. Well, naturally, only 10 milligrams is going to be absorbed anyways. So as we age, this ability to absorb, even half is significantly reduced, which is just going to lead to an increased deficiency rate. And the loss of function in any of the organs of the stomach, pancreas, or small intestine is going to impair the B12 absorption, leading to a deficiency. So adults can have several years worth of stored vitamin B12 in their body, so deficiency does take a little while for it to occur. Mild deficiencies can result from dietary patterns that result in insufficient dietary intake of animal food sources, such as those who are vegetarian or vegan. And then we also see changes in the stomach function that results from aging or the use of pharmaceuticals. So medications can also reduce the absorption of B12 from food. So mild deficiency does not necessarily show clinical symptoms, and it's only going to be diagnosed through a serum test, so through a blood test. This is the only way to test if a mild deficiency is present. But up to about 38% of adults may exhibit mild B12 deficiency and depleted B12 stores. So specifically as we age, it is important that when we have yearly checkups, we do get our vitamin B12 levels checked every year to just make sure that our levels are not being depleted and we don't have a mild deficiency that is unknown. And because malabsorption increases as we age due to decreased acid secretion in the stomach, this reduced acid secretion inhibits the capacity for the stomach to be able to extract the B12 from the foods itself. And then medications can also play a role in the deficiency. So medications can decrease the acid secretion from the cells in the stomach, and these medications include Tagamet, Pepcid, Axid, Zantac, Prilosec, Prevacid, Acifex, Protonix, Pantolic, and Nexium. So several of these medications you may be familiar with. Most of these are antacid medications in general. And medicines do not block the absorption of B12 from supplements because supplemental B12 is not bound to protein. So if an individual is taking a vitamin B12 supplement, then any medications that may prevent acid in the reduced absorption of B12 won't interfere with any kind of oral supplements with vitamin B12 because it's not bound to any sort of protein. So having a supplement form of B12 is going to be able to be extracted more easily than the food form. And then about 30% of adults over the age of 50 have atrophic gastritis and low stomach acid secretion. So another reason why the absorption rate of B12 is going to be diminished over time. And then it is recommended that individuals over the age of 51 do take a vitamin B12 supplement. Now, for severe vitamin B12 deficiencies, we will see other types of manifestations, including anemia, neuropathy, and myelopathy. And a cobalamin deficiency anemia or pernicious anemia is present in about 2% of adults. So this anemia specifically comes from the deficiency in B12, severe deficiency. And the signs and symptoms of this deficiency are going to be peripheral neuropathies, such as tingling and numbing in the limbs, such as the hands and feet. Motor disturbances, so individuals who may be unsteady on their feet, inability to maybe lift their arms or legs, and then visual disturbances as well. Lastly, we do see individuals who have severe B12 deficiency have cognitive impairments, including memory loss, disorientation, and dementia. So individuals who take B12 supplements, other forms of supplements besides oral may be necessary in severe deficiency cases. So sublingual is one type of supplement. Instead of taking the pill supplement, sublingual is going to be under the tongue. So it's typically either a pill that dissolves under the tongue, or it's going to be a liquid administration that goes under the tongue and then it's absorbed that way instead of going through the stomach if the stomach you have impaired utilization or absorption in the stomach. And then secondly is going to be an intramuscular shot, so a shot that goes into the muscle and it is absorbed that way instead of going through the stomach or the GI tract. So there is no tolerable upper limit that is established for B12. So typically toxicity is going to be rare because we don't have a specific number that is an upper limit that has been known to cause toxic effects. And this is because the body typically excretes excess B12 through the urine because it is a water-soluble vitamin, so any excess is going to be eliminated. However, safely, the daily limit is going to be about 2 milligrams per day or 2,000 micrograms, just to be on the safe side. Next, we're going to go into calcium. So calcium is an essential nutrient. It is actually the most abundant mineral in the body. And 99% of calcium is going to be found in the teeth and the bones. And then we have about 1% in the serum or blood. And serum calcium does not fluctuate with changes in dietary intake. So if you ingest a whole bunch of food that has calcium in it, you're not going to see a direct fluctuation in the serum calcium levels. But a drop in serum calcium, so if you do have low blood calcium, this will trigger a transfer from calcium from other areas of the body to make up for that loss of calcium in the blood. So it will take calcium from the kidneys, the intestines, or increase the absorption of calcium-containing foods in the stomach. Or it'll also take calcium from the bone. So as you can imagine, taking calcium from the bones is going to be, semi-dangerous because we don't want to have extraction of calcium from the bones because that can lead to issues with our bones, weakness, osteoporosis. So calcium has several functions. It first off builds and maintains strong bones and teeth. And then it is involved in a lot of vascular contractions within the heart and other parts of the vascular system. It is a vasodilator, so it basically increases the dilation of your blood vessels. It's going to be involved in muscle functions and contractions, the nervous system, intracellular signaling, so signaling from one part of the body to another. And then it is also involved in hormonal secretion. So many factors involved in what calcium is involved in. Calcium deficiencies are often seen in the elderly, and this is due to low calcium intake over time. So as I said, partly due to the decrease in overall calories as we age. And then medication interactions as well are going to decrease the absorption of calcium from the food that we do consume. And then underlying chronic diseases can also have an impact on the calcium levels. Osteoporosis is going to be the change in bone formation and strength that we often see. And inadequate calcium intake may change bone mineral density, again, leading to weaker bones. So calcium metabolism depends on a few other nutrients as well. Protein must be available to help move the calcium from the intestines across the border into what's known as a calcium pool, where we basically store the calcium. It is required to provide the serum IGF-1, and this interacts with the renal system to transform vitamin D into its active form. So vitamin D is also involved in calcium metabolism. And vitamin D receptor is needed to move calcium from the digestive tract into the blood. So deficiencies in both calcium and vitamin D are going to impair blood calcium levels. And then lastly, phosphorus is needed to create the formation of new bones and repair existing bones as well. So deficiency in phosphorus is going to inhibit any kind of weak or bones that need to be repaired. And by ages 25 to 30 years old, the majority of new bone formation is completed. So as we age, the emphasis of bones is really going to be placed on maintaining bone density and preventing the loss of bone density. After the age of 50, bone density often decreases. So the goal is just to sustain bone mineral density and to minimize bone loss. Progressive bone mineralization loss over time increases the risk of bone fractures and falling. So with the intake of calcium and vitamin D together, more than 1.5 million fractures are reported each year in individuals who are over the age of 60. And there is a strong correlation between dietary calcium intake and reduced risk of fractures. So vitamin D and calcium intake is most effective at prevention of these fractures. So both nutrients are going to be important for preventing fractures and falls in general. So adequate nutrition is going to be important for bone maintenance, especially in those who are over the age of 50. Remember, the goal after the age of 50 is really to maintain bone density and strength. And nutrition-dense foods that have a combination of calcium, phosphorus, vitamin D, and protein are going to be important to consume for adequate nutrition and maintaining bone health. And then again, the overall goal of reducing fractures for bone formation, bone mineralization, muscle mass, and strength. So calcium and protein intake. Skeletal and muscles compose about 50% of our protein stores. So sarcopenia is known as loss of muscle strength and mass. And we see this a lot in individuals who are older. So specifically, about 50% of adults over the age of 80 years old have sarcopenia or have this loss of muscle strength and mass. And sarcopenia is the leading cause of fall risks as well. So the calcium recommendations for males, for those who are aged 31 to 70 years old, the recommendations is about 1,000 milligrams per day. For males over the age of 70 years old, the recommendations are 1,200 milligrams per day. And then in females, Individuals who are age 31 to 50 years old, it's recommended to consume 1,000 milligrams per day. And individuals who are over the age of 50 should consume about 1,200 milligrams per day. So calcium-containing foods are going to be dairy products such as milk, cheese, yogurt, green leafy vegetables such as kale, okra, spinach, cabbage, broccoli, and then soy milk that is fortified with added calcium, and then orange juice is often fortified with added calcium as well, such as bread products and flour products as well. Next, we're going to move on to vitamin D. And vitamin D occurs naturally in animal foods as the provitamin calciferol. And calciferol requires the conversion in the kidneys to its active form, calcitriol. So humans are able to synthesize adequate vitamin D with sunlight exposure. So it's known as photoconversion. Basically, the sun provides the provitamin form of calciferol, and then it is transformed in the kidneys, then sent to the livers, and then it becomes the active form of vitamin D, and our body is then able to use it. So this is just a little description about vitamin D and several processes that happen. So on our left-hand side, we have vitamin D that's going to come from our food choices, both the diet and supplements. And it basically enters the bloodstream, it goes into the liver, and then from here it's going into the kidneys, where it's involved in several processes, but mainly it becomes, after it goes to the kidneys, in the kidneys it's converted to its active form of vitamin D. From there, it's going to go to several places such as the brain, the blood vessels, the intestines, the bones for bone health, to other monocytes and macrophages, to other types of cells, blood cells, the pancreas. It's going to be able to do its job after it's in the active form. When we obtain vitamin D through the sun, it is basically the pre-vitamin D is absorbed through the skin. From the skin, it goes to the blood circulation, then it goes to the liver, and then it goes to the kidney, and then from there becomes its active form of vitamin D, and it's able to go to all the other processes as well. So very interesting how we can obtain vitamin D from both our food and supplement sources as well as the sun. However, as older adults, they are at an increased risk for lower levels of vitamin D as a result of decreased subcutaneous synthesis and dietary intake of vitamin D. So as we age, let me go back, this process of converting vitamin D from the sun is going to be diminished because, again, as we age, our bodily systems are not as functional as they are when we are younger. So as we age, the skin does not have as much ability to convert vitamin D from the skin synthesis to the active form. And about 41% of adults in the U.S. have deficiency. So it's a pretty high number. 69% of individuals who have deficiency are going to be in the Hispanic population. 82.1% are going to be African Americans. So then some additional risk factors for those who do have vitamin D deficiency are going to be reduced nutritional intake, increasing adiposity, so individuals who have a greater amount of fat, and that's because it's harder to convert the active form through the skin if there's a lot of layers of fat that are in between the subcutaneous tissue. And then again, as we age, decreased ability to synthesize vitamin D through the skin, and less time spent outdoors. So as we age, older individuals are typically going to be spending less time outdoors as opposed to someone of a younger population. So these signs and symptoms of vitamin D deficiency are going to be frequent illnesses, fatigue and tiredness, bone and back pain, depression, impaired wound healing, bone loss, hair loss, and muscle pain. So a pretty wide range of signs and deficiencies. So again, it is difficult to narrow down, if someone is exhibiting signs of deficiencies. How do you know which nutrient it could be from? So typically you're going to need a blood test, or oftentimes you will need a blood test in order to determine that an individual does have a deficiency in vitamin D. So we're going to go a little bit about osteoporosis. About 10 million adults over the age of 50 suffer from osteoporosis. So again, this is the loss of bone mineral density. And 80% of this 10 million are women. So vitamin D and calcium play a vital role in supporting the health of the skeletal muscle or the skeletal system. And low vitamin D causes reduced calcium absorption. So they kind of go hand in hand. And this then increases the parathyroid hormone, which increases bone turnover. So there's a higher rate of bone that is going through a process of trying to change over and to become new cells. And this leads to osteopenia and osteoporosis, or the loss of bone mineral density. And there is a positive correlation between low vitamin D and increased risk of falls, fractures, muscular weakness, and then overall poor physical function and balance. So deficiency and diagnosis is going to be done through a serum blood test. It is very common, and most people are really unaware that they have deficiencies because the signs and symptoms are so subtle and very nonspecific. It's difficult to know that you have a deficiency unless you get a blood test. However, a deficiency is quite easy to fix. Individuals can increase their sun exposure if they're able to. You can consume more vitamin D-rich foods or take a vitamin D supplement. Typically, without enough adequate sunlight, it is nearly impossible to achieve sufficient levels of vitamin D from food alone. So if you're not able to get sunlight, consuming these foods is great, obviously, but you may need a supplement. So foods that have high amounts of vitamin D are going to be salmon, okra, kale, fortified orange juice, egg yolks, soy milk, spinach, mushrooms, and tuna fish. So vitamin D supplementation. Supplements are going to be the most appropriate treatment for older adults. And vitamin D toxicity is very rare. It is going to be caused by excessive ingestion of vitamin D supplements over an extended period of time. You cannot get a vitamin D toxicity from being out in the sun too much. It's impossible to have toxicity from the sun. Supplement recommendations for individuals who are under the age of 70 years old. The recommendations are going to be 600 IU vitamin D daily, and IU is international units. And then for individuals who are older than 70 years old, the recommendations are going to be 800 international units daily. Next, we are moving on to zinc. And zinc is an essential mineral present in some foods. It is involved in numerous aspects of cellular metabolism. It's also involved in the immune function. It is anti-inflammatory. It is involved in the protein synthesis, so various proteins, skeletal proteins, and then as well as DNA, RNA. It's also involved in wound healing as well. So older adults are at an increased risk for zinc deficiency, and this is mostly due to reduced food and nutrient intake. Again, as I mentioned, as we age, the amount of calories that we consume becomes specifically lower than individuals of a younger population. And it is also due to reduced absorption ability. Zinc deficiency is very difficult to detect, however. So blood tests may not be reliable because they are not very sensitive to mild cases of zinc deficiency. So typically the only way to determine a deficiency is if the deficiency of zinc is very severe. That's the only way to get a real conclusive test result. There are a couple zinc deficiency signs and symptoms. So a scaly red skin rash that is going to be seen typically around the mouth, the hands, and the groin area. And then an individual might have diarrhea. They may have a loss of appetite, which is actually a major sign and symptom of zinc deficiency. One of the most common ones that you would typically see. And then increased number of infections. So in order to combat a zinc deficiency, the easiest way is just to increase the food consumption of zinc-containing foods. So foods that are high in zinc are going to be lean meats, so chicken breast, turkey, any type of lean meat, seafood, grains, beans, and legumes. So for vegetarians, consuming meat obviously is not going to be an option if they're vegetarian. However, zinc is also common in vegetarian foods such as grains, beans, and legumes as well. So for zinc supplements, older patients who do not eat a lot of meat may benefit from a multivitamin containing zinc or a zinc supplement. And it is important that if they are taking a supplement, that they are staying below the upper limit of 40 milligrams per day, because there is a zinc toxicity possibility with supplementation. So toxicity of zinc is going to be vomiting, diarrhea, cramps, and headaches. And one other thing I wanted to mention about zinc supplements, if you see, or if an individual is exhibiting signs of, deficiencies, let's say loss of appetite, increased number of infections, mouth or rashes of the mouth, hands, and groin area. One thing that can be done is since if it's a mild deficiency, it's difficult to detect in the blood. So sometimes patients will start on a zinc deficiency or a zinc supplementation, and if you see an improvement in any of these deficiency signs, then you know that it was probably a zinc deficiency. So it's one way to kind of tell whether or not an individual had a zinc deficiency is if they start on supplementation and you see an improvement in any of these signs or deficiencies. Next, we are going to move on to vitamin C. And vitamin C deficiency is relatively rare in developed countries, but it still affects about 1 in 20 people. So the elderly are at an increased risk due to reduced food intake. And deficiency in vitamin C results in a condition called scurvy. And this is known as, you're going to see an increased bruising, bleeding of the gums, weakness, fatigue, and then a rash as well. So low vitamin C intake, vitamin C accumulates inside various types of immune cells to help combat infections and destroy disease-causing pathogens. So it's very important for immune health purposes. Low vitamin C intake is associated with poor immunity and a higher risk of illnesses like pneumonia. And pneumonia is very common in elderly population. So severe deficiency of vitamin C can also be the cause of death from serious infection because the body is just not equipped to handle this type of infectious disease without having the proper amount of vitamin C to help combat it. And having low intake of vitamin C can also cause an iron deficiency anemia. They often occur together. So low vitamin C intake may contribute to iron deficiency by reducing the absorption of iron and affecting iron metabolism. So persistent iron anemia deficiency may be due to low vitamin C levels. So if an individual does have persistent iron anemia, it could be due to they're not consuming enough vitamin C to help with the absorption of iron. So the recommended daily intake of vitamin C is 90 milligrams for men and about 75 milligrams for women. Now, in individuals who smoke, it is recommended that they consume an additional 35 milligrams of vitamin C per day. And this is because tobacco reduces the absorption of vitamin C, and then it increases the amount of vitamin C that the body uses. So foods that are high in vitamin C, well, first off, very little vitamin C is needed to actually prevent scurvy. So that's why scurvy is so uncommon now, is because you only need a little bit of vitamin C in order to prevent it. And it's about 10 milligrams per day, which is equivalent to about 1 tablespoon of a bell pepper. So a very, very little amount of vitamin C is actually needed per day. But vitamin C rapidly breaks down when it is exposed to heat. So the raw form of fruits and vegetables are the best sources of vitamin C compared to cooked sources. However, the body does not store large amounts of vitamin C, so that's why it's recommended to eat fresh fruits and vegetables every day to make sure that you are getting an adequate amount. And then some foods that are high in vitamin C are going to be red bell pepper, as I mentioned, kiwi, lemon, orange, strawberries, broccoli, and parsley. So you see a little list here. So we've got kiwi, Brussels sprouts, citrus fruits such as oranges, lemons, lime, papaya, bell peppers, as I mentioned, strawberries, rose hips, guava, and these aren't pretty common that you would see in facilities, parsley, broccoli, kale, and pineapple. So supplements of vitamin C. Supplementing vitamin C has not been found to be toxic. However, taking more than 2,000 milligrams per day may cause abdominal cramps, diarrhea, and nausea. So if someone is taking more than 2,000 milligrams of vitamin C per day, it's important to keep an eye out for some of these signs of toxicity. Next, we are moving on to the quiz portion. So our first question is, what age group is at an increased risk of nutrient deficiencies? So we have A, ages 50 to 64 years old, B, 65 to 74, C, 75 to 84, or D, 85 and above. And I'll give you a minute to answer. So the answer is D, 85 and above. So this is going to be our oldest group of the elderly population that's going to be at an increased risk. Question number 2, older adults are at an increased risk of nutrient deficiencies due to what? A, reduced absorption, B, social environmental changes, C, reduced appetite, or D, less caloric intake, and E, all of the above. So the answer is all of the above. So older adults are at an increased risk. A, as we age, our ability to absorb nutrients through the stomach is reduced. And then we have social environmental changes. So individuals who may have been living at their home and now they're living in a facility, and maybe due to depression or other types of environmental changes, they're eating foods that they're not typically used to consuming. And then in general, as we age, we do have a reduction in appetite and overall caloric intake. So all of the above are going to be reasons why nutrient deficiencies are increased as we age. Question number 3, what percentage of older adults consume less than the daily recommended intake of vitamins and minerals? We have A, 10%, B, 25%, C, 50%, or D, 70%. So the answer is C. About 50% of older adults consume less than the daily recommended intake of vitamins and minerals. Question number 4. All of the following nutrients are absorbed less effectively as we age, except for what? A, vitamin A, B, vitamin D, C, vitamin B12, or D, calcium. So the answer is vitamin A. Vitamin A is the only food that is more easily absorbed in the stomach as we age. Question number 5. Which is not a sign or symptom of vitamin B12 deficiency? A, tingling or numbing of the hands or feet. B, increased thirst. C, motor disturbances. Or D, cognitive impairment. And the answer is B. Increased thirst is not a sign and symptom. So the signs and symptoms of vitamin B12 deficiency are going to be tingling or numbing of the hands and feet, motor disturbances, and cognitive impairment. Question 6. Low serum blood calcium causes extraction from where? A, the bones, B, kidneys, C, intestines, or D, all of the above. So the answer is D, all of the above. So having a low blood calcium is going to cause extraction from all of these 3 places in order to make the levels more equal. Question number 7. Which of the following is not a good source of vitamin D? A, apples, B, mushrooms, C, enriched orange juice, or D, sunlight. And the answer is A, apples. So apples is not a good form. However, mushrooms, orange juice that is enriched with vitamin D, and the sunlight are all going to be good sources of vitamin D. However, if a deficiency is prevalent, especially in older individuals, the most appropriate form to obtain vitamin D is going to be through a supplement form. 8. A zinc deficiency may occur in people who do not consume a lot of what? A, fruits, B, milk, C, meat, or D, vegetables. And the answer is going to be meat. So you may see an increased risk of deficiency in zinc in older individuals because typically they do consume less meat, or you also might see an increased risk of deficiencies in individuals who are vegetarian. So supplements may be appropriate for individuals who do not consume enough meat. Question number 9, a deficiency in vitamin C may cause a deficiency in what? Vitamin D, iron, potassium, or D, phosphorus? And the answer is going to be B, iron. So because vitamin C is important to increase iron absorption, if you have a deficiency in vitamin C, it may be also common to see a deficiency in iron. Or if you have a deficiency in iron, it's possible that you also have a deficiency in vitamin C because you're not able to absorb it as easily. And then last question, number 10, bruising, bleeding gums, weakness, and fatigue are the signs of what condition and caused by what nutrient deficiency? We have A, anemia and B12, B, scurvy and vitamin D, C, anemia and calcium, or D, scurvy and vitamin C. So the answer is, oh, sorry about that. Okay, well the answer is D, scurvy and vitamin C. So a vitamin C deficiency is going to cause scurvy, in which you would see an individual that might have bruising, bleeding gums, weakness, or fatigue. And that concludes today's presentations on vitamins and mineral deficiencies in older adults. Have a great day.